Richard Nathan Wright was born September 4th, 1908, in Roxy, Mississippi, but he later moved to Natchez, which is not far from Roxy, to live with his grandparents and his mother, where his dad would later leave the family for another woman, and his mother, Ella Wilson Wright, would begin working as a cook to support the family.
Richard Wright published his first short story at the age of 16. Later, he found employment with the Federal Writers Project and received critical acclaim for Uncle Tom's Children, a collection of 4 stories. He is well known for the 1940 bestseller Native Son and his 1945 autobiography Black Boy. The 4 stories were The Outsider, The Long Dream, Black Power, White Man Listen.
This black author only managed to get a ninth grade education, but that did not stop Richard. When he was just 16 years old, he published a short story in a South African newspaper. Being that he had such little education, when he lived in Chicago, he worked at a post office and swept streets to make an income. 10 years later, he moved to New York City, where he was told he stood a better chance at getting published. One of Richard Wright's famous quotes simply states, "The more closely the author thinks of why he wrote, the more he comes to regard his imagination as a kind of self-generating cement which glued his facts together, and his emotions as a kind of dark and obscure designer of those facts."
Richard Wright was a valedictorian at Smith Robertson Junior High School. He later joined the Communist Party. He published an autobiographical essay titled The Ethics of Living Jim Crow, which was included in the book Uncle Tom's Children. Native Son was the first best-selling novel by a Black American writer and sold 215,000 copies in 3 weeks. Wright, his second wife, and daughter moved to France, Paris in the 1950s. He wrote several novels, but none were a success. In 1960, he moved to England but wasn't happy. He fell ill and moved back to Paris, entered a hospital on November 25th, and died 3 days later.
The American Negro writer died of a heart attack on the 29th day of November in Paris. Sadly, he was only 52 years old. According to his friends, he found here in Paris, France, a greater degree of freedom from his discrimination against members of his race than in his own homeland.
One morning my mother told me there was no food for breakfast. I knew that the city had opened relief stations, so I put on my hat and coat and went out. I rode in zero weather for miles in open trucks, then spaded the frozen earth for 8 hours, only to ride home again in the dark. A strange emotional peace had come to me. I knew that my life was cast with the men with whom I worked, slow, plodding, inarticulate men, workers all.